Progress.
Good morning, everybody. I'd like to call to order the Board of Retirement meeting. Today is November 1st, 2023. The year's just flying by, and the time is 9:21 a.m. First item is our Pledge of Allegiance. Ms. Gray, can you please lead us?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
That brings us to our procedures for teleconference meetings. I don't believe we have any, so we will move on to the approval of the minutes of. Oh yes, we should do the staff report out. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Kehoe. This meeting is being held virtually and in person, so I will do a roll call of the trustees to confirm attendance. Trustee Knox and Trustee Sanchez will not be joining us today. Trustee Gray, Trustee Harris,
Here.
Trustee Santos,
Here.
Trustee Oakham,
Here.
Trustee Robbins,
Here.
Trustee Green will be joining us shortly. Trustee Greenwood is not present. Trustee Bernstein,
Here.
Chair Kehoe.
Present.
Staff participating in the meeting include CEO Santos Kryman, Deputy CEO Louis Lugo, Assistant Executive Officers JJ Popovich and Laura Guglielmo, CIO John Grable, Chief Counsel Stephen Rice, Senior Staff Counsel Frank Boyd and Jasmine Bath, Interim Senior Staff Counsel Elaine Salon, Legislative Affairs Officer Barry Liu. Staff and managers participating today include Carly Natoya, Kathy Delino, Chat Arande, Ted Granger, Cassandra Smith, Louis Gittins, Vincent Lim, Ricky Contreras, Tamara Caldwell, Vicki Neely, Carrie Wilson, Hernan Barrientos, and Ricardo Salinas. LACERA's medical advisor, Dr. Glenn Arisman, will be joining us as well. Milliman Consultant Actuaries, Nick Collier and Craig Glide. Naomi Padron from MKP Government Relations is also participating in today's meeting. Trustees, please use the raise your hand Zoom option to be placed in the queue. At this time, we ask all meeting participants to mute their mics until you are ready to speak. And now we may proceed with the agenda.
Perfect. That now brings us to item 4, which is the approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of October 5th.
So moved.
Motion. And moved and seconded. Please vote.
Mr. Santos, how would you like to record your vote? And Ms. Gray?
I abstain.
Okay.
And then also, if trustees can turn on their videos, I know we've had them off in front of you. You just got to click on the bottom left Zoom start video. So we are broadcasting. Okay, next item is our public comment. I have no requests.
We have no requests.
Oh, got it. Okay. Okay, and there are no requests from the public to speak. We're moving on to our executive updates with our All-Stars and JJ.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good morning, trustees. Our All-Stars are staff members we recognize who have gone above and beyond in helping deliver superior member experience to our members or to help their fellow staff members. So please join me in congratulating Cynthia Martinez, John Kim, Lisa Garcia, Veronica E. Martinez. There were no web watchers or rideshare winners for this month. So thank you very much for everything that you do.
Thank you. Congratulations. And now on to our member spotlight.
Yes, so please join me in taking a moment to recognize and celebrate the member selected for this month's Member Spotlight. Our Spotlight program is all about recognizing the hardworking members who serve constituents of LA County and to celebrate their contributions to our community and to provide us a moment to reflect and remember why we do what we do to serve our members. So for this month, our spotlight is Tyrone Brown. Mr. Brown began his county career as a lifeguard, teaching essential swimming and safety skills to countless children. And he later stepped up to being a parks supervisor. I love this fact that he's keeping it in the family. Apparently his daughter is following in his footsteps and is going to be a lifeguard or is lifeguard for the county. Mr. Brown is planning on retiring this month. And so he plans to stay active in the community and keep on volunteering volunteering, and of course, keeping up with his swimming. So thank you very much, Mr. Brown, for all that you've done for the county.
Thank you, thank you. And we're moving on to our CEO's report.
Yes, Chair Kehoe, trustees, good morning, and staff and consultants, members of the public. So the CEO report is in your packet, but I did want to go over a few things, just to highlight a number of items. So we did have our management offsite on the 18th of October. We had approximately, I want to say about 60 managers and supervisors. So we went all the way down to the supervisorial level to discuss the different pillars that the Board of Retirement had approved. Of course, we had our superior member service, member experience, innovation through technology, investing in people, compliance and enterprise risk management, and fiscal durability are the pillars that we were all discussing. I can tell you that everybody was really excited to see one another. It was the first time since COVID. I think it was October of 2019 when we all got together in person. And so it's been that long, 4 years. And so we had a very productive meeting, a lot of discussions about what direction we need to take and how do we execute on the plan that you all have approved. They're in the process of developing action planning teams, and those teams will continue to meet and formulate the actual steps that are required and the resources that will be needed in order to execute on the plan. And so I know that there was a lot of enthusiasm. There was a lot of team bonding. It was good to hear a cross-section of ideas among staff and the executive team and the managers. So I would classify it as a very productive meeting. And so we look forward to continuing to collaborate together moving forward. In terms of the one meeting application, there had been, you can see that there's some changes to the user interface. Bonnie and Linda and our staff have done a good job of identifying areas where we would like one meeting to improve on. Those lists of improvements have been provided to one meeting, and over the course of the next year or so, they should be implementing some of those changes in order to make our meeting experience and also our document viewing easier moving forward. And so I do want to thank Bonnie and staff for their diligence in terms of making sure that the one meeting application continues to meet our needs. Bonnie also wanted me to plug that she's available for training, one-on-one training, for those of you that would like to have that meeting with her. So in terms of the trustee elections, there was a question last meeting about the method of voting, electronic voting, telephonic voting, as well as paper ballots. And you can see that we were absolutely correct that people that are retired overwhelmingly want to use paper ballots in order to cast their votes. And so we will share this with information with the executive office, and we'll move forward to make sure that that practice continues. And we'll even talk to them about expanding it to active members as well. So I did want to let you know that I did receive an email from the executive officer. She is planning on retiring in January. And so we will be, this is the executive officer of the Board of Supervisors, not the CEO. So we're going to meet with them and talk a little bit about the interaction between our elections and LACERA and how we can improve on that relationship even more. So I wish her well. In terms of recruitment updates, there's been a lot of activity. to date. So I do want to let you know that that we've completed the interviews for division managers. So I think we have 4 vacancies on the division manager side. 4 offers,
3.
letters are being prepared and will be sent out for those particular positions. Member services, benefits, admin services,
That's
and
it, just the 3.
3. There's 3. And admin services. And so those letters are being prepared, and we're hopeful to be able to close those negotiations and have those folks on board sooner rather than later. In terms of, there's an item on the agenda for the benefits lawyer to replace Fern. And so we appreciate your consideration of that particular item. So we're hopeful that we'll be able to move forward and complete that negotiation as well. There are 2 IT manager positions that we are in the process of preparing offer letters to as well. So one is for the project management section, the other one is for the infrastructure section. And then we have one IT manager that is starting today, actually, and they're on the program side. And so Kathy, do you mind introducing?
Good morning. I would like to introduce Ganesh Gopanapalli, and he's the ITM manager in charge of business solutions. He started today. We're super excited to have him. You want to just say a few words?
Sure. I'm like an hour into LACERA here. So this is a little bit overwhelming for me to be in a board meeting at this point. But anyways, I'm very excited to be a part of LACERA and being part of Kathy's team here. And a little bit about myself is I've been here. I live in Moore Park in Ventura County with my family, my wife, and 2 kids. I have worked with Anthem for over 20 years and in various roles. And past 15 years, I have had leadership roles in IT. So I'm excited to be here. And thanks for the opportunity again. Appreciate it.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome to the team.
I can tell you that no one is happier than Kathy Delino, because that is the new Kathy Delino now. So I did want to also mention that we continue
Santos,
to work.
may I ask
Yes,
a question? There are 115 vacant spots.
Yes.
How are you running this place? With 21% less than, you're running with 80%?
That's approximately, yes. So we augment our staff with temporary employees. So
How many
there's another
temporary
chart.
employees do you have?
Do you know
roughly?
how many we have? It's in the chart. There's another chart.
I don't know
Well,
off the top
Is that down at the bottom? No, that's where the vacancies are.
No.
But we have Carly on the line if she.
Yeah, is Carly up?
Oh, here it is, here, yeah.
Yeah, there is a chart page.
So we augment it with temporary employees, and then of course we're in the process of trying to hire as many individuals as we possibly can. Now that we have the management team and the supervisors on board, we didn't want to move forward until they are on board, so that they had the ability to interview the candidates, and we had the benefit of their experience in terms of what they may need. And so that's been part of the holdup, as well as updating some of the job descriptions and some of the things that we need based on the changes that we're making.
How many of these
So-
jobs are because of the county,
Well,
roughly?
well, let's put it this way. On November 7th, on the board agenda, the Board of Supervisors agenda, there are approximately 42 positions that are going to be approved by the Board of Supervisors. I'm assuming the board has their own mind and their own timelines, but it's going before the board.
These
So
are
we have-
ordinance positions that
These-
we're asking for.
That's correct.
any of those positions that they didn't approve for?
Yes.
Okay.
I believe the answer is yes. I think it was we had asked for additional RBS 1 positions and 2 positions. There were
But
2.
these wouldn't count towards vacancies because they're not approved items. So the 21% are actual true vacancies of approved items.
Yes, but
Those are
But
going
what-
to
one-
that's going to increase your percentage as soon as you get them on the books.
But one of the issues is that on the RBS ones, for example,
thank you.
we have to have classes, right? So we didn't have enough ordinance positions at the right levels in order for us to move forward on one of the classes. So that class has been delayed. So we were anticipating on doing a class in October. We're not going to be able to do it until after March Madness. We're more than likely going to have a class coming in April or May of next year in order to augment our staff. And so a lot of the information that you see in the CEO report, for example, a lot of individuals, why they like self-serve, most of our members still want to have one-on-one interactions. And so we don't see that trend is going to change anytime in the near future. So although we're planning for the future and planning for a self-service sort of environment, they still want to have interactions with our staff. They just feel more comfortable that way. And so that's the reason we need those positions. But we are moving forward with trying to fill all of those positions. And like I said, really, COVID had a lot to do with the delays. And then we had to update a lot of the job descriptions, and we had to do a lot of skills analysis and so on and so forth in order for us to get to this particular point. But
I'll also
we've
even
also-
say that 20% vacancy factor within government is actually not
bad.
and not extremely abnormal. But obviously, our goal should be to get that down to 10% lower levels. I mean, I'm at 36% vacancy in my command, so
Right.
that should give you an idea of what we're dealing with at the sheriff's department. But 20% is reasonable, and a lot of those items, just like you said, are strategically held as vacant. So maybe if you did want to, you could look at, say, out of these 20%, these are how many we would love to fill today if we have the ability to. That
Right.
might be closer to 10 or 15%.
Yeah, that's what we'd like to have everybody, quite frankly. But it's really a testament to the management team and the staff, their dedication. They do a lot more than they're just very committed to the mission of the office, quite frankly, and to our members. And so we make allowances for that. We're continuing to work with Mr. Grable and his team to try to fill his particular positions as well. I know that they're constantly interviewing folks in terms of trying to find the right fit for his division. And so let me see. I think that is it. So I'd be more than happy to stand for questions.
Questions for the CEO's report? I'll say on my end, one meeting still has a long way to go before I'm comfortable with it. As you spoke about one meeting, the entire time my document was loading and spinning. This is hardwired, it's connected directly, it's not Wi-Fi. And your document, your report, which is actually a relatively small file compared to disability retirements, couldn't even load. That's a problem with the provider. That's nothing here. That's the provider. That's the way that they provide the documents and the way that they buffer and they do catching and everything else like that. So that's a problem compared to the other system. So I still have concerns about it. I understand it's good for running the meeting as far as being able to vote and run through agendas, but our previous platform was way better for document retention and review. So that's my opinion. I think the Board of Investments has voiced very similar thoughts on it. So I'll leave it at that, and hopefully we can get that situation resolved.
Okay.
Okay, we're going to, if there's no objection, we're going to go back to public comment because we did have a miscommunication. We did have one person from the public that did want to speak. So. Okay, welcome.
Welcome. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for having me. My name is Mara Vic Ha. I am the widow of Viet Ha, who's a LACERA member for LA County. First and foremost, I would like to thank you guys all for having me here today. Viet worked for the LA County since the age of 26 and planned on retiring through the age of 65 and even beyond. He was a hard worker, great work ethic, liked and respected by all his colleagues, supervisors, as well as the community and people that he worked with through the restaurants and constructions. He served in the community, making sure that everything is provided through the public health codes, as well as keeping everybody safe through waterworks, main lines, and also restaurants. He was always there when needed, even if he has to work on weekends, holidays, and off hours, like 1 o'clock in the morning due to emergency calls. With the COVID, he was the public health, LA County Public Health was considered as a disaster worker and essential workers. So they were the first line of public health officials out there helping the public to keep them further safe. We worked a lot of hours and hardly took any vacation time off, and wanted to note with you that his last paycheck recorded 581 hours of vacation left, 960 hours of 50% sick, and 320 hours of 65%. Combined, that is over 1,800 hours that he banked before he passed, before he contracted COVID. Being a disaster worker, as I said, he's out there first line of defense and working, provided with proper PPEs. We still can't help the public on what they do. And unfortunately, he contracted COVID on November 24th, 2020. He passed away due to complications of COVID with brain hemorrhage. With that said, if he didn't contract COVID, or even if he survived with the major brain hemorrhage, he would have been on disability and applied for such and be able to complete his 25 years of service with the LA County. He was 1 year shy of getting that 25 years of service and reduce the pension that he would provide for my family and my kids to go to college. So I ask of you, and I come here today in person to plead and let you know, please don't let COVID win again. He has served the community well, and to the expense of myself and my family, I know he's done a great service for the community. Viet deserves a lot more than the COVID and what he has given to my family. Please don't let that 24 years of service take that away from his work ethic and his hard work. And don't take COVID take anything anymore away from my family, my kids, and from his parents. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And we're very sorry for your loss, as well as all of our loss here at the county for his service. We're going to be hearing that case in closed session later today. So we're now going to move on to our disability retirement applications on the consent calendar. So we'll hear the consent calendar. This is first applications will be page 1 and 2, application number 200E through 214E. I'll make that motion.
So moved.
Moved and seconded. Let's please vote. If the vote doesn't appear on your screen, just click on the link. You should have the live meeting app open.
Mr. Robbins, how would you like to record your vote? Yes. Okay, the motion passes unanimously.
Motion passes. That brings us now to our fire and lifeguards. Going to be page 3, application 1750B through 1759B. Need a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and second. Let's please vote.
Passes unanimously.
That passes unanimously. The non-service connected disabilities, we had none, so we're moving on to our general member service connected disabilities. That is page 5, application 2650C through 2657C. I'll need a motion.
Move approval.
Seconded. And let's put this up.
Mr. Oakham, very good. Passes unanimously.
That passes unanimously. That brings us to our last page, page 6, which is application 4500, a non-service connected disability. We'll need a motion.
Move approval.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Please vote. Passes unanimously. Okay, that brings us back to our regular agenda, our item 8, our consent items. Do we have any members wishing to pull item A through F?
I'll move consent.
Consent has been moved.
Second.
It's seconded. Let's please vote.
Passes unanimously.
Passes unanimously. That moves us past our excluded consent item and into our non-consent item. We have, we're gonna, without objection, we're going to, oh, okay, let's see. We're gonna go on the consent calendar because it's a report that we're gonna hold off on. So non-consent item A is where we're at, and that is our special step placement for the CEO's proposed appointee for senior staff council. And we have a memo dated October 25th, 2013, or 2023. So back in time. Let's please, we'll need a motion.
Move approval. Second.
Moved and second. Any discussion or presentation needed? Seeing none, let's go ahead and vote.
Mr. Santos and Ms. Gray?
Yes.
Okay, item passes unanimously. That brings us to item B, which is to provide direction to the SACRS 24 legislative platform. We have a number of items in front of us, so I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Barry to do a quick overcap, and then we'll see what direction we want to go as a board.
Thank you, Chair Kehoe. So at next week's SACRS fall conference on the last day, the business meeting, we'll be considering sponsorship of the SACRS 2024 legislative platform. Basically, there are 4 main items that will be put into a bill for sponsorship. The first item deals with prepaid accounts. It will make an amendment to clarify that prepaid accounts may be used to pay our members. And this was a proposal by LACERA as we're in the middle of implementing a prepaid card program. The second item clarifies that a trust account may be used to receive retirement benefits. There's different interpretations by the various SACRS systems on this, but this would provide some consistency and uniformity. It basically clarifies that the payments may be made to a living trust or an income-only trust. And the third item deals with the return receipt requirement for certain mailings. It requires that a physical return receipt be requested. This would remove that requirement since you can track signatures electronically, although if a system still wants to use a physical receipt, they may still do so. And then the last item deals with post-retirement employment, where members can work up to 960 hours during retirement. What this would do would be if they were to exceed those hours, it would be offset against their retirement benefit. And this was a proposal that LACERA has submitted to SACRS as well. So those are the items for sponsorship, and our recommendation is that our voting delegate vote yes to support the platform. I'm happy to take any questions.
Move approval. Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, let's go ahead and vote. Item passes unanimously. That brings us to our reports. Thank you, Barry. Our PEPRA impact presentation, if there's no objection, we're going to hold off on that as Mr. Jason Green had asked for that presentation. So he is on his way. So we're going to move into our B item, which is our state legislative update. So I'll let you continue, Barry.
Yes, thank you. So today we have our state legislative advocate, Naomi Padron from MKP Government Relations, who will give us an update on the latest state legislative developments. And so I'll hand this over to Naomi, and Bonnie will be driving the slides for this.
Great. Thank you so much, Barry. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for having me. My name is Naomi Padron with MKP Government Relations, and I'm pleased to be here today with you to provide a brief legislative update. Next, please. During this presentation, I will cover a number of items, starting with some key legislative dates. I will try to recap all of the bills of interest, discuss changes in leadership in both the Senate and the Assembly, go over state budget figures, talk about the 2024 March primary election, and then provide some recommendations as we go into next year. Of course, throughout the presentation, please let me know at any point if there's questions, and then of course, happy to answer questions at the end. Next slide. So jumping right into it, on this slide, I've included a number of key legislative dates and deadlines, starting with September 14th. That was the date on which the legislature adjourned for the year. Then the next day on the slide you'll see is October 14th. That was the deadline for the governor to act on legislation. This year, he actually finished a day early on October 13th. And just some quick figures to highlight on that. Newsom acted on 1,046 measures. Of those, he signed 890 and issued 156 vetoes. His veto rate was right at about 15%, 14.9, which is pretty on par with what we saw in 2022. His veto rate was 14.4%. Of the bills that were signed, most will go into effect on January 1st, unless otherwise stated. I will note for those measures that the governor did veto, he cited frequently just budgetary concerns, so things that were not included, in the budget, but cost, significant amount. Many of those proposals were rejected. With the legislature adjourned for the year and the signing period behind us, the focus, it really shifts to 2024. The legislature will reconvene on January 3rd, at which point members can start to introduce bills and, of course, work on two-year measures. 2023 was the first of a two-year legislative session, and so that means that some bills that didn't move or stalled will be eligible to move in January as two-year bills. And then finally, the last date that you'll see on there is January 10th. That is when the governor is constitutionally obligated to put forth his budget proposal to the legislature, at which time, the budget process is really kicked off. And then, of course, the governor is able to showcase, some of his priorities for the year. Next slide, please. Even though I just started getting into 2024, would like to take, a couple liberties here to provide a quick recap of some of the 2023 bills of interest and convey the outcomes. The first bill you'll see on the slide there, SB 885, that is the annual retirement system omnibus bill that provides various cleanup provisions for the retirement systems, CalPERS, CalSTRS, and SARL systems. This year, the SARL amendments made were relatively non-substantive and technical and conforming. That bill was signed into law. The next bill I will go over is AB 1020 by Assemblymember Grayson. This bill established several new disability retirement presumptions for various injuries and illnesses, things like PTSD, tuberculosis, Lyme disease, that are similar to those in the labor code. The author and the sponsor, which was the California Professional Firefighters, agreed to technical amendments proposed by SACRS that were eventually amended into the bill and really put in there to help us implement and apply these presumptions. Next slide, please. Moving right along here, the next bill I'm covering is AB 1637 by Assemblymember Irwin. This bill dealt with local government websites and email addresses. The bill requires that cities and counties use a .gov or ca.gov domain no later than 2029. This bill was signed, and I highlight it just to say that as introduced, the bill applied to all local agencies. So wanted to make note and sort of showcase this trend or this desire for this to be a little bit more broad. And, sometimes what happens is, as bills get narrowed throughout the process, you'll kind of see a second effort in the following year. So just something, I will keep an eye out and report to you guys on. The next bill deals with
regarding 1637, is there any applicability to pension plans?
Depending on how it's written and the definition of local agency, there could be some applicability. Yeah. So not for 1637 as written, it's specific to cities and counties and was narrowed in that way. But as originally proposed, it would have scooped pension plans in. And so that's just, why I highlight it in case the author sort of takes a second bite at the apple and goes back and expands the bill. But I think there was some concern about how broad it was introduced, and it then was narrowed just specifically to cities and counties. So as signed and as implemented, it doesn't include the pension systems. But if, Ms. Irwin or any other member thinks, hey, this is actually a good idea, or this is, working and we want to expand upon that, definitely something that could potentially be introduced in the coming years.
Can I just add that LACERA did move forward to secure the LACERA.gov domain. And so if this does come to pass, we're ready to go.
Okay, perfect.
All right.
Great, thank you so much. The next bill is SB 252 by Senator Lena Gonzalez. This bill deals with fossil fuel divestment, and it was specific to this bill specific to PERS and STRS. But of course, this type of divestment bill from a precedent standpoint could be concerning. Ultimately, the bill did stall and was made into one of these 2-year bills. So something that we'll continue to watch in 2024 as the author has committed to, working on the issue in the near future. And of course, bills like this and other type of divestment bills are something, we've seen in the legislature several times. So next slide. The next bills and really the final bills I'll go over touch upon the Brown Act and some of the teleconferencing flexibilities that members of the legislature are trying to pursue. The first bill being AB 557 by Assemblymember Greg Hart. This bill removed the sunset in current law to allow teleconferencing during certain emergencies. So that's really, kind of doing away with that sunset of what current law already is and how we're already operating. That bill was signed into law. The next bill is SB 537. This bill would have allowed for expanded teleconference flexibilities for multi-jurisdictional or cross-country legislative bodies if certain requirements, were met. And really, this bill sort of originated out of the recognition by the author that board members often face difficulties with travel for, bodies that cover large areas. On this bill, SACRS met with the author to seek amendments that would clarify that local retirement systems were covered. But given that the bill was experiencing, pushback from civil society groups such as ACLU, as well as, newspaper groups, it was unclear if the author was willing to kind of make those clarifications, just because at that point, I think there was a recognition that the bill was probably going to be parked and stalled. It does have a pretty high threshold in terms of it being a 2/3 vote. And then again, there was that opposition, but for right now, it's on the inactive file and something that, could potentially be revisited in 2024. Next slide, please. The final bill on this topic, open meetings and teleconferencing, was AB 817 by Assemblymember Pacheco. This bill really was the broadest bill, didn't deal with, multi-jurisdictions or anything like that. It just would have created a definition for a subsidiary body, which, retirement systems would have been clearly included as part of that, and would have allowed for flexibilities to the teleconferencing rules. Unfortunately, that bill did not get as much traction as I think some folks would have hoped, and ultimately the bill stalled and was never heard in policy committee, but could potentially move as a 2-year bill, but very clear that this one had some hurdles that it had to overcome as it was the most broad. Next slide, please. Concluding the bill review and really shifting gears here to the legislative leadership in the legislature, wanted to note that in 2024, we will have new leaders in both the Assembly and the Senate. As you might recall, after some jockeying for the position, Assembly Speaker Robert Rivas did assume his post at the end of June. Given kind of the timing and that it was right in the middle of the legislative year, he did not make kind of wholesale changes to chairmanships or committee makeups. However, it is anticipated that new chairs and new committees will be announced soon. That could potentially include, new chair of the Public Employment and Retirement Committee. Stands to be seen if the current chair, Assemblymember McKinnon, will stay on. On the Republican side, it appears that Assemblymember James Gallagher out of Yuba City, who has been the minority leader in the Assembly since 2022, will keep his post. On the Senate side, it was recently announced in late August that Senator Mike McGuire will be the next pro tem, replacing the current pro tem Adkins. At this time, though, no official transition timeline has been announced or specific date in which he will take over, but there is speculation that this will happen in early 2024. Similar to the Assembly, on the Senate side for minority leader, we're not hearing of any changes. The current leader is Brian Jones, and he has been leader also since December of 2022. Next slide, please. Plugging right along, let's delve into the state budget next. As mentioned, the governor is constitutionally obligated to provide his budget blueprint by January 10th. The 2023 Budget Act, signed by Newsom in June, projected a $14 billion shortfall. And of course, last year, we also saw a fairly significant shortfall after previous years where we did have, historic surpluses. The revenue figures that I put on the slide there are from August, and those figures did show that the state was actually exceeding forecasts, which was positive news. However, more recent reports indicate that the budget gap could grow as state tax revenue collection has not been as high as projected. So just to put this into context a little bit, the State Department of Finance projected that because of the 6-month extension in the state's filing deadline, that California would collect about $42 billion in October. As of the 25th, California has collected just $18 billion. So obviously fairly significant gap there. It should be noted that the state may wind up getting closer to that target by the time we hit closer to mid-November, given that the IRS did announce a subsequent postponement till November 16th. So we'll continue to report and look at budget forecasts and report on the January budget proposal. Next slide, please. Touching on the March 2024 presidential primary, that is set to take place on March 5th. All California active voters will receive a vote by mail ballot, as we've seen in some of the previous elections, really dating back to COVID. And then those ballots will start going out February 5th. There will be one ballot measure, Proposition 1, dealing with mental health and sort of looking to reform the California's mental health and substance abuse disorder systems. Notably, there were a number of other measures that qualified to be on the March primary, but they opted to go on to the November ballot. So I think you're going to see, kind of different from March, where there's just one proposition. I do believe that in November, you'll see a number of propositions. And then, of course, on this ballot, we'll have candidates for president, for U.S. Senate. I failed on my slide, apologies, to note congressional members. And then as far as the state legislature, we'll have all 80 assembly members and 20 senators, as well as candidates for local office. Just kind of to touch a little bit more on, some of these legislative seats. We will see some turnover here in the legislature in terms of open seats. There are 17 open seats in the Assembly and 12 in the Senate. So basically, at the very least, we will see 29 new members, and that's not taking into consideration, some of these incumbents that may be challenged or some of the more competitive seats. I raise this point only because, I think it's important that we recognize that there's going to be turnover and members that, might not know who we are, and, we might want to get them better acquainted with LACERA and the things that we care about. And then, of course, just introduce ourselves and serve as a resource, should they have retirement questions. Next slide, please. And then finally, I wanted to provide some recommendations for things that we can focus on during the next legislative session. First is the SACRS proposal that Mr. Liu just went over. In the interest of time here, I won't reiterate any of the points, but you'll see them depicted there on the slide. Given that some of these proposals were put forward by LACERA, and that, it seems like there is support for these proposals, we would want to work hand in hand with the SACRS representatives on seeing that these successfully move through the legislative process. Next, I want to continue to, we will continue to look at other bills and would recommend that we scan, the legislative environment and look at, if there are any bills that we can support or potentially any bills that may have a negative impact on LACERA, or those, again, that, maybe just we want to monitor or, kind of keep on our watch list, if you will. And then also we may see some bills on this that we can offer, technical amendments or things that might, move our agenda forward. And then finally, here I would welcome having representatives from LACERA do a Sacramento visit. We've done this in the past, and I think it's been really successful. Members have enjoyed meeting with folks. And again, this provides an opportunity for us to meet with, any new members of the LA delegation, new members of, the various committees or committee chairs, as well as key staff. And I think this year, given that, we do have some of these proactive proposals via the SACRS Ledge platform, that, we could potentially kind of lobby or discuss some of those bills during the visit as well. Next slide, please. Said happy to answer, any additional questions if there are any.
I'll open it up to the board. Any questions from any trustees? I'll re-bring up an issue that we've discussed before in the past, which is the possibility of allowing members to pre-designate their retirement option, so that if they were to become deceased, that option would stand. Example is that if I were to retire right now, I'd give option, the modified plus option to my wife, so she can continue to get 100%. But if I were killed suddenly, she would only get 60%, because you only get to choose that option while you're retiring. But I think that the members should be able to designate what their selection would have been, so that if they were to become deceased, that would continue on to that member. We've talked about it before in the past. I had hoped, I was going to bring this up during the SACRS discussion. I had hoped that would have been formulated and been able to be pushed to SACRS, but I don't want that to be lost. I'd like our staff to look into some sort of language to be able to make that work and to bring it forward to our board to be able to discuss. So I'll put that out there again. I think that that's something that we should advocate for on behalf of our members. It is our members' money, and it is they should be able to make those options ahead of time. Any other comments?
I agree. I agree with Mr. Kehoe. I think that's a very important issue that we should address. Members, given the classification, in great danger, and unless they have the ability to pre-select, it's problematic in the event of a death or otherwise. So I echo what he and support his position here.
Yeah, so we'll definitely examine the issue and make any proposals to the board.
Thank you. Other questions or anything on the presentation? Well, thank you so much for the presentation. We very much appreciate it and all your efforts. Please keep us informed on any 2024 legislation that will impact us. And if there's no further questions, we're going to move back to item A, which is our PEPRA impact presentation. So if we can get that team queued up. Yeah, okay. Ted, is this your show?
Yes, it is.
Perfect. Yeah, take it away.
Great. Good morning, Chair Kehoe and Board of Retirement Trustees. For the record, my name is Ted Granger. I'm from LACERA's Financial and Accounting Services Division. With me today from Milliman is LACERA's consulting actuaries, Nick Collier and Craig Glide. So I'm going to provide a brief overview and some context around this presentation before we jump into the slides. I want to thank Trustee Robbins for sort of a preview of some elements of this topic and discussing those at the OOC earlier today, but we'll definitely get into the meat of the discussion within the slides. We're here to address a question that was raised by the Board of Investments at their last meeting, the last discussion with Milliman back in June of 2023. At that time, Milliman presented the annual risk assessment report, and that report is really where the actuary takes a look at key risks to the plan and the plan participants. They identify those risks, they assess those risks, and they talk about mitigating controls and what LACERA does to address those risks. Really, essentially, it's a discussion about actuarial assumptions. Those are obviously risk factors when we're trying to predict the future. And so when we set those assumptions, there could be some risks associated with that. Key risks, investment return, payroll growth, salary increases. Those are some of the things that we talked about in the risk assessment report. Within that discussion, some questions came up regarding PEPRA's impact on LACERA's actuarial assumptions. In particular, we started talking a little bit about payroll growth and that assumption. That assumption is currently set at 3.25%. That is the assumption where we think about how the county's active population will grow, how they're hiring and retaining employees. That in turn influences the contributions that the county provides as well as the employees. When we were discussing this with Milliman, we talked a little bit about potential changes to active membership. We're thinking through this. How does this affect the employer contribution rates and also the plan funding metrics? So those are some of the thoughts we had in going through this, and we'll talk a little bit more about those things in the slides. With that, we felt like it was important to bring this issue to the Board of Retirement just to give this board some perspective on how PEPRA on the benefits side could be potentially influencing or impacting sort of our pension plan metrics and our funding metrics on the Board of Investment side. So with that, unless there's any questions for me, I'm going to let Nick and Craig get started, and we'll try to abide by our 20-minute time frame. But be sure to ask questions and engage if deemed necessary.
Okay, thank you, Ted. Good morning. I think Ted might be almost qualified to give this presentation himself now, but he certainly, if we can move on to the next slide, please. Made my introduction slide redundant, so I will not repeat any of what he said. Next slide, please. So just to give you a brief overview of what we're going to present to you this morning, in a minute or so, Nick is going to give you an overview of some of the membership statistics, some historical context, where we were, how we've got to where we are now as far as the membership. And he's going to discuss some benefit comparisons and the projected benefits that a member might expect to receive under PEPRA compared to a similarly situated person in the legacy plan immediately prior to PEPRA. After Nick presents that, I'm going to give a high-level overview of some of the hiring and retention risks faced by the employers, and as well as some of the risks to LACERA if there's a continuation of any hiring and retention challenges over time. And finally, we'll finish up by just discussing a couple of the specific allowances and considerations we make in the valuation, specifically with regard to the PEPRA plans. So next slide, please.
Okay, so kind of looking at how the active membership and microphone.
One more time.
Okay, thanks. All right, looking at how the active membership has evolved, specifically looking at the general members over the last 25 years, it's no surprise to you. If you look at the light blue bars, that's the total population. There's been a gradual growth of about 1% a year, although that's definitely varied by year. What is probably no surprise is over the last 10 years, we've seen a large growth in the PEPRA membership since PEPRA was introduced in 2013. As you see right now, PEPRA is about 40% of the active population for general members. Interesting to note that if you look at other California county systems, they tend to be over 50% PEPRA. So that might indicate lower turnover among LACERA, although hearing earlier conversations about unfilled position that those would generally be filled by PEPRA members, so that PEPRA percentage might be slightly understated of where it ideally would be. But the point is that as we see the PEPRA membership growth, that's going to have, not only does the benefits going to affect how members are hired, but also how members are retained. And obviously, as we have a greater portion of your current membership being PEPRA members, that retention becomes a bigger issue. Moving to the next slide, which is the safety members. Similar pattern here, slightly slower growth in active membership, but very similar growth in the PEPRA group, and safety has slightly lower turnover, and we've seen they're now about 37% of the current actives. So we want to kind of transition into, as Craig talked about, kind of comparing how the benefit factors apply under the old plan and under PEPRA. But first off, I want to kind of talk about kind of what factors affect hiring and retention. And, there's obviously a number of surveys out there and looking at those factors. Interestingly, since the pandemic, and maybe not a surprise, is that things like work environment, flexibility, work-life balance have become bigger factors. And, we're not going to get into that. Our focus is going to be mainly on the benefit side, how PEPRA has affected that. We would also note that when you're talking hiring and retention, obviously salary is going to be a big deal, and that generally the perception is that salary is going to be more important than benefits. Although, having worked with public sector plans for a number of years, I know that public employees definitely value their benefits, particularly safety members. Especially the members who've been around a few times, they definitely appreciate their pension. So to put that in perspective. Okay, so moving forward to benefit comparison on the next slide. So we've tried to come up with an illustrative person, and just a reminder of what PEPRA did to the benefit levels. There were a number of factors, and a couple of these have already been touched on. First off is the age factors, what percent, per year of service that you get at retirement. Those were changed, generally lower. But there are a number of other factors. The final average salary period for LACERA's plan was one, on to 3 years under PEPRA. Obviously, the PEPRA compensation cap can be a big deal for certain members that are highly compensated. And lastly, I'm missing one thing, PEPRA compensation. The compensation that's included in your benefit was restricted under PEPRA. I think that probably generally has a bigger impact on safety members, where certain compensation elements are no longer included. So that reduces your compensation for your benefit calculation, and therefore reduces your benefit. So looking at this chart here, we tried to give you a representative member from general plan, from a general member. So we would have been in general plan D under the old, if they didn't elect D, comparing them now to the PEPRA plan, general plan G. And you can see the benefit levels that we've shown. The orange is the old general plan D, and then the blue bars are the general plan G. As you see early on, there's a relatively bigger difference. It's about 18 to 20% in the early 50s. But as it gets older, and the more typical retirement ages in the 60s, it kind of goes down to more into the 8 to 10% range. And actually, when you go over 67, there's really very little difference in the two benefit levels. But obviously, when talking about general members, there's when talking about retention and hiring, there's going to be competition. Obviously, on the private sector side, basically none of them have traditional defined benefits. So in that respect, they don't really compete directly on the benefit side. But if you look at on the other plans, most other public sector employers are going to be covered by PEPRA. But as was mentioned earlier, obviously LA City is going to be the one that, since it's a city charter, it's not defined by PEPRA. So we did a comparison here, and you can see that green line that reflects LACER's tier 3, which is the open general tier. As you can see, it's really, there's not that much difference between the LA City benefit and the LA County benefit. I'd note that just like PEPRA was enacted, a lot of other retirement systems, and LA City is one of them, they reduced the benefit levels that were available. So really, these are pretty comparable. I want to go move to the next slide to show where there is some difference, though, and this is definitely alluded to, and there were definitely some examples here, is once you get into trying to hire the higher paid individual, then PEPRA becomes a much bigger deal. Now, this is somebody at $100,000. There's obviously examples of much higher pay early that were given, and then that would have a much bigger difference. So this person is the exact same person hired age 5 with $100,000 salary. Now, they are projected to hit the PEPRA compensation limit at age 52. And obviously, as mentioned before, their benefits still will keep growing with compensation increases and service, but their compensation increases will be limited to whatever the PEPRA compensation limit goes up, and that is what is CPI inflation, which will tend to be lower than a member's compensation because members' compensations tend to go up with things like productivity, longevity, and promotion. So what you see here is that now all of a sudden, instead of what I was saying in that key retirement ages of in the 60s, instead of 8 to 10%, now you're seeing it's about 30% greater. And if you took more extreme cases, if you said $200,000 salary, all of a sudden that orange bar would be twice as high and a blue bar would not move at all. So hiring, that could make the hiring at the higher levels, positions more difficult. I would note that also the other component of the one of the other components of the equation is how much the members are paying. The members' rate would be slightly lower, is slightly higher under PEPRA than under the old plan, and that's for compensation up to the PEPRA compensation limit. On LA, comparing once again to the LA City, there's actually there's a bigger difference, but actually might be noticeable to the member. It's about a 2% of pay difference. That LA City is about 2% of pay lower than what the PEPRA limit is. So that goes through general. Oh, yes, please move forward one.
Nick, one quick question, and you talked really fast on this, but the PEPRA retirement compensation is indexed. It does that cap does move.
Yeah, that's indexed with inflation.
Okay, each year it's reset.
Yeah, so in theory, our assumption for inflation is about just under 3% at 2.75. Obviously, it's been higher, and I think the PEPRA compensation will limit up 8% last year, and then it's going to go up about just under 4% this year.
Okay, thank you.
So the total amount today is what, 174 maximum?
In 2023, it's a little over 175. Yeah.
75.
There's two different caps though. What's the other one? The non Social Security cap. What's that at?
Yeah. So the 175,000 it's 120% of the cap, and so that's for people who employees who are opted out of Social Security. They don't receive any Social Security benefits. For members who are eligible for Social Security, it would be the base cap. So the 175 is 120, so it'd be about, I think it's about 146 in that sort of range. But I think all, or most, if not all, LACERA members would be at the 120% cap.
Yeah, and just to clarify, Craig meant employers that had opted out of Social Security, which would be most of your general members and I believe all of your safety members. So moving to the next slide. So now we've applied this to a safety member. This person is hired age 28, which is approximately the average hire age for safety, typically coming out of the academy. This would be kind of on the low end of a new hire at about 72,000. As you can see, the pretty similar picture to what the general was. There's really not that much difference under Safety Plan B versus the new PEPRA benefit, and the under now. Of course, we looked at LA Fire and Police as our comparison. Once again, not much difference. Really, the new plan is the PEPRA plan is about 10% lower than the old plan, and really it's pretty much in line with LA Fire and Police. The one thing I would point out there is a pretty significant difference is that the member contribution rates, the members under PEPRA, for the LACERA members, are contributing 5% of pay more than under the LA Fire and Police plan. And I note, if you are interested in how the member contribution rates work, we do have that as an appendix in our presentation.
So when we're looking at this, it kind of refutes a lot of the assumptions. If we're looking at 57, which is the target for Safety Plan C, and we're comparing that to the LA Fire and Police Plan Tier 6, it looks like the Safety Plan C is slightly higher than the Tier 6 benefit at age 57.
Yeah, it's very close. Obviously, if we move forward to the next slide, we can see that because the safety members tend to be higher paid, this is just somebody hired at, this is 90,000, which is slightly on the higher.
So you just ruined my arguments with
No, yeah.
I was trying to help out recruitment a little bit.
Yeah.
Mr.
But-
Chair, if I may,
yeah.
quick question. I just had a question, review of this, the salary increase, you guys averaged at approximately 3%, but you have it listed as non-pensionable.
Oh, right. Sorry. Yeah, that's, I should have mentioned that. As I mentioned earlier, one of the big differences between the old plan and what was under PEPRA, obviously, is it excluded some compensation elements that people used to have included in their compensation for their average benefit. But so we've, for example, we've excluded 3%. So even though we have a $90,000 example here, we reduce that by about $3,000 to say, hey, some of that 90,000 that the member is getting is going to be non-pensionable. So
you're just identifying a percentage that would be excluded under PEPRA, as far as a differential enhancement of the retirement benefit. That's just
right.
It's
Yeah.
not, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Things like bilingual pay. Oh, actually, I think bilingual pay might be. I should probably not.
But I understand it now. I believe so. Yeah. So then and so that, did you, do you have a number for the, an average, including the non-pensionable segmented 3% that is the average increase for safety?
I mean, yeah, the average increase that we've reflected is I think it's slightly over 5% because
Once you add in the merit scale.
When you add in is 2.75% for kind of general cost of living increases plus longevity plus promotion, and then you get up over 5%.
Okay, so that's the average. Then you exclude 3% of it. It's not. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for clarifying.
Did you say that the county employees and safety plan are paying 5% more than LAPD? Or
yeah.
So if you matched the amount that's being put in, where would that end? I mean, that's a lot of money, 5% over 25, 30 years.
Yeah. Plus a higher in absolute term pension. So this is the competition that the county has for hiring law enforcement and fire department.
Oh, but Sean, you're paying 5% more than LAPD, correct?
Not me, but new hires.
Yeah.
So that's new hires. So if you got $100,000, that's $5,000 a year over 30 years, $150,000.
Right.
And and you got the same retirement plan.
Or you have
Pretty close.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think that's probably, particularly your new hires are probably going to be looking at compensation more. So, unless the county can offer 5% more to kind of offset that.
Well, but then you got to pay taxes, everything else, and that comes out. So it's still, 3%.
It would work out to 5% the way the relative impact would be.
And that came in 13. When?
Yeah, 2013, correct.
What percentage does a safety person pay of their salary into the retirement?
Safety, I've got it here. It is about 14.5%.
14.5%.
Yeah. And that's just, just for a refresher, PEPRA, actuaries calculate what the value of the benefit is relative to the compensation. And we say basically each year the value of the benefit is 30% of the compensation. The members have to pay half of that. So that's at about 15%. that the members are paying, because they have to pay 50%. That's specified in law.
They're not paying tax on that amount.
I believe that
15% that growth, okay, do they not have to pay tax on the growth also in the 14% they put in? Ted, you know that?
I mean, on their contributions. Oh, are you saying? You're saying that the contributions they put in, they go on the member account and then they get interest on that? Yeah, I'll turn it over to Ted to talk about that.
So the contributions are pre-tax out of their paycheck, and then LACERA has an interest crediting program whereby we look at the investment earnings every 6 months, and we determine if we can credit the member's account, their contributions on file at LACERA. We determine if we can provide interest credits to those accounts. And so that's based on CPI and investment earnings. There's some calculations we do to do that. So
roughly, if somebody's getting $80,000 in retirement, 20% of that is not taxable, probably, something like that.
No, I think it'll all be taxable.
Well, that's your money that you put in.
But it was pre-tax money when it went in.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, unless it's service-connected disability for safety members that they can, then there's tax advantage of that, but that's.
Mr. Chair, and Ted, this question for you, the contribution difference, the 1.18%, does that account, I know PEPRA, for Plan C, it has to be, legacy, it's every 3 years for the contribution rate adjustments. And for PEPRA, that fiscal year adjustment, is that consistent, just over 1% in the rate? Because there's technically a 2-year gap. I think I'm trying to find out how to articulate this. That legacy contribution will flux based off age of membership and whatnot.
correct.
How consistent is that contribution rate, maintaining that 50% contribution for the legacy? Is that fairly projected out, I should say?
Right. So are you asking if the PEPRA rates for Safety C, that's adjusted every year, compared to the legacy rates that are adjusted every 3 years, are you asking whether the legacy rates sort of catch up or whether that's comparable if the legacy rate, for example, goes up?
I think simply is that 1.18, is that projected to be consistent moving into the future?
It's going to move around a little bit, and obviously, as we talked about, as you're aware, the legacy plan, there's difference. This is a person entry age 28, so there's that difference is going to vary based on what their entry age. If they hire at a younger age, it's a bigger difference. If they hire at older age, it's a smaller difference. But I would expect that for that entry age 28 person, it should remain relatively stable, except it is pretty leveraged, so it could definitely move around a little bit.
Yeah, I just, these are the questions that kept me out of the really good schools here. But what, as far as reciprocity hiring, we do have existing, policy and rules that, if someone was hired pre-PEPRA, is that a significant amount of people come to the county? Have you guys looked at that as that would maybe skew or impact this?
So
don't think we looked at that explicitly as part of this study.
Inflow versus outflow. How are we looking at for reciprocity?
Yeah, right. So I remember that somebody that comes in with reciprocity with another system
versus people that are leaving.
Yeah, and it's gonna go smaller and smaller as we go forward. I think JJ, that's pretty small.
I mean, it's not been a significant number. I don't have numbers, but it's not a significant number. But we can get some numbers on that. Share that with the trustees.
Consistent. I mean, I see a lot of people leaving, so I think you're going to have a higher outflow than inflow, but I don't think that has to do with PEPRA. That has to do with a lot of things.
Yeah, a lot of different things. Yeah, normal wage, opportunities that they may have, promotional opportunities. Yeah.
We'll chalk that up as a future information item for us.
Will do.
All right, if there's no more questions, I'll turn it over to Craig to kind of talk about the implications of this.
Okay, next slide, please. And in the interest of time, I'll try and move through this quite quickly here. So we know over the last several years, I mean, largely due to the impacts of the pandemic, on a macro level, a lot of employers have had trouble hiring and retaining people. There's been large outflows from the workforce, and people have definitely been leaving their current employers and retiring from employment faster than had been typical prior to the pandemic. There has some evidence that in the last year or so, there has been definitely a slowing of that trend and potential reversal of that trend on the macro level. And we're in the middle of working on the 2023 valuation, and we've sort of seen that a bit more stability from 2022 to 2023 in the census data, in the LACERA data than we had in the prior couple of years. So there might be some change coming there, and how that plays out in future, and time will tell on that. The county and other employers are obviously better positioned than we are to talk about some of the specific challenges and reasons for some of the hiring and retention issues. There's many reasons people leave employment and make those decisions, that we are not necessarily privy to all of those. Obviously, the total compensation package is likely to be a significant factor, and the retirement benefits in the public sector is definitely a large portion of that total compensation package. As we've talked about, especially with LA City, who are not subject to PEPRA, to the extent that somebody's really interested in their retirement benefits and they feel that PEPRA might be a better deal somewhere else, there's a competitive factor there that could be playing a role in some of those hiring and retention issues. But we don't have any explicit data to say that there is one single reason for why this might be happening. I'm sure it's a combination of reasons. But generally, in a tight labor market, employers always need to be enhancing their attractiveness to current and future employees, and the total compensation and benefits are definitely a significant factor in that. Next slide, please. So looking at some of the risks specifically to LACERA, if hiring and retention challenges were to persist in the future, one of the main risks, as we talked about, is on the payroll growth, and whether payroll grows at a rate greater or less than what is assumed by the assumptions in the valuation. So the main risk is if it grows slower than what we assume. And so it could grow slower because there's been a decline in the active population due to either slower hiring or faster turnover. It could also be just due to lower compensation increases to current employees, or some combination of the two. But the chart on this slide is showing two scenarios. Here, the blue bars are showing a projection of the employer contribution rates based on the current valuation assumptions. So this assumes a 3.25% average annual payroll growth. And the other scenario is assuming a 1% annual decline in the active population. And so that, with a 1% decline, versus a stable population, that would be roughly equivalent to 2.25% payroll growth compared to the assumed 3.25. And so that declining population, the projected contribution rate is shown by the red line. So we see that under the stable population, 3.25% growth scenario, the employer contribution rate in aggregate is projected to decline from about 26% of pay down to about 25% of pay over 15 years. Whereas with the declining population, it will increase to about 27% of pay over that same time. It's worth noting that the contribution rate will go up under that scenario, but with a declining population, it is actually on a smaller payroll base as well. So the actual dollars, there'll be some mitigation there on the actual dollars, just because it's a higher percentage on a smaller payroll base, but as a percentage of pay, the rate would increase with that declining population by about 2% in 15 years.
I have a question from Les Robbins.
Yeah. I'm sitting here listening to this, and I feel like this conversation could go on for about 3 hours, and you're probably already over the limit, but I appreciate the discussion. But unfortunately, we're only going to scratch the surface of what's really going on here today. And I have a couple of questions. Number one, do your calculations take into effect the difference between calculating a pension at the highest year versus a 3-year average?
Yes.
Yes.
Now, here's my other question that's going around in my mind, and I want to talk about monthly pension contributions and how that works. So for purposes of discussion, let's say that I make $200,000 a year, which is about what a sheriff's lieutenant makes. Now, at what point during the year do my pension contributions stop? And then what happens? Because my understanding of PEPRA is once I have made in the calendar year more than what my pension is going to give me based on that current ceiling number, which is 175 today, lieutenant probably going to hit that 10 months into the 12-month calendar year. Does our contribution stop at that point?
Yeah.
I would assume it should, yes.
So it stops.
Yes.
What if they want to invest that money and put it in something else instead of just doing what I know
what
they're
they
all
should
going to
be
do, which is going to go spend it.
Yeah.
They're going to buy an RV or whatever. They're going to buy boy toys, and the bottom line is,
Or girl toys.
what concerns me is what I think is insidious about PEPRA is it's going to create more poor people in retirement because they're not going to be able to maximize their retirement income based upon what their working income was because of these stupid ceilings and everything else. And my understanding, Ted, is the law precludes them from going into a Roth IRA or something else. They can't invest that money that's no longer coming out of their paycheck, because when the pension contribution stops, the check's going to go up quite a bit for that period of time. And in the county, when we've got doctors, lawyers, high-level paid management people in public safety areas, and a whole lot of other high-paid medical jobs, we're going to have a lot of people in the county that are going to exceed. In 10 years, they're not going to be paying anything 6 months into the calendar year. Their pension contribution is going to end, because that's just the reality of where it's going to be.
Yeah, I mean, those people are gonna have to have the discipline to take that when their pension bumps up, to take it and do it on the side. I don't think there's no mechanism within LACERA to do that.
Correct. Right.
Human nature.
Les, did you have any more questions?
No.
Okay.
I was just gonna say that they do have the ability, or we have the ability as county employees, in a situation raise, we can increase our contribution through the 401k. I assume lieutenants and captains get 401ks.
Not lieutenants, captains.
No, they do not. The captains?
Captains are, mega flags.
So for Brahma class. So anyway, for lawyers and doctors, captains and above, we do have the ability to increase the contribution to the 401k and the 457. That's an example. And I have known lawyers
but there's a ceiling on what they can.
Right, 25,000, I believe, is the ceiling right now. But what people have done in the past, like when we closed Plan A, a lot of the lawyers in my office, what they did is that they got out of A, credit to E. But what they did is that they religiously every year took the contribution and invested in the market. So
the smart ones.
They're smart ones. That's
There's a lot of dumb ones that didn't do that. There's a lot of them. Well,
a lot of this they got out of Plan A. A lot of this discussion applies to many of the classifications, or at least some of the classifications that we have in LACERA. So that's something. It not only applies to the county, but as well as how people hear. And the question is, Mr. Kryman, is that going to impact your ability to recruit and retain? And is that one of the issues that you face when you hire in these high-level classifications?
Yes, thank you for the question. The short answer is yes. I think that the last 2 months really highlights that. We had one individual who we just introduced that we had to negotiate a higher salary, right? And then we have an item this morning that was approved, and thank you very much for to attract an attorney at that higher level of pay. And so they will definitely be impacted by the limitations of the PEPRA, as opposed to our legacy members that don't have that cap.
I want to highlight that although this is not directly related to the pension fund itself, we are part of this bigger, infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that outside of this room, there's very few people, especially big decision makers at the county level, that don't understand the future impact. And all of them are going to be gone, not having to worry about any of this.
Mm-hmm.
And then everybody else is going to be holding the bag, trying to figure out how we catch up. And I think that we do have a responsibility to bring these to the attention and to educate folks and to put those things, because that's an issue that we just talked about. Lieutenants and below who are going to be hitting this cap do not have the ability to put money in a 401k. I do, but that makes it so that they aren't going to have those benefits. Those are things that should be discussed and things that they should be considered. Of course, a lot of these are labor issues and stuff like that, but they have to understand that there is a real problem. It's not just labor complaining. It's a real issue in the future. And I think that we have a responsibility to educate and provide not investment or financial advice, but some things to think about. So, take that to the marketing team and see how we could do that both for our partners, but also our own members when they're looking.
Yeah, I think this is an area where we can definitely partner with our empower folks so that we can see how we can incorporate that as part of the education process for the high wage earners as well as the individuals that are just coming in to the county system. And so we'll reach out to them to do that. The other thing also in terms of educating, what we will do is the presentation that you see today, we'll go ahead and package it and send it to the Department of Human Resources as well as the Chief Executive Office, just as an FYI, to let them know that this is an actuarial analysis of the impact that PEPRA has had in comparison to legacy and PEPRA members. And so we'll see what we can do to put a 1 or 2 page report summary, executive summary on top of this particular presentation and send it forward. And then we'll try to have a discussion with them about it.
Before you go out, Mr. Green had a question, but I don't know if.
Yeah, first off, thanks so much for compiling this. This is, really, I think, as Mr. Keogh said, there's a lot, and this is the tip of the spear, so to speak. Thank you for putting it together. It's a great presentation. I wholeheartedly agree that this is a huge threat, and if people aren't paying attention to it, it's going to come back and bite them. All of us, I see it as a double-edged sword for recruitment. Not only will the employee not see the money in retirement, but because of the decreasing population, they're also going to have less money in their pocket because of the increased payroll contributions. Is that an accurate statement?
Yes, they're making higher contributions and receiving a lower benefit.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay, and then I would like for the board to possibly entertain the idea. This has to be changed at the legislative level. Obviously, this and two scenarios I'd asked for analysis, if possible. A simple legislative change. One being that the cap, lifting of the cap entirely, or a tiered cap based off salary. That could be something that could be lobbied, and I don't think would ruffle the feathers of too many politicians up in Sacramento. I would like that looked at. What would that look like in comparison to what we have now? Some type of, if a doctor makes $400,000 a year, their cap would be adjusted based off salary. And then the second legislative change would be similar to legacy, because the 3 years are realized earnings, correct? They have to actually earn that money in that 3-year period. legacy employees have potential earnings for, you know, what they should make for the year, regardless of hours worked or income. And that would be my second legislative question scenario would be what would happen if there was ability to change from 3 high years of realized earnings to actual earnings for 1 year, similar to legacy. You know, that would possibly give this board and other entities maybe some direction to push at the state level.
Yeah.
And I don't know if a motion is in order to.
I don't think we need a motion unless there's objection to asking staff to do that. I know Vivian has a question, but I just want to make sure does staff understand?
Yeah, I believe we understand
Okay.
the direction, yes.
That's great.
It's not necessarily a question to you, but the likelihood of an amendment to PEPRA is the question that we have. Now, in order for us, I mean, because you've done a great study here, you've also provided points that we all knew about, but it kind of makes it a little official. But it's not just a LACERA issue. It is all of the systems, you know, statewide. So perhaps legislation, and I know Mr. Liu would probably help us out, but by putting it to SACRS, the State Association of County Retirement Systems, that sponsors legislation like this, so that LACERA would be part of it, and so would the other 20 systems. And then there are other organizations within the state of California for defined benefit plans that also could put forth legislation.
So let's do this. If there's no objection, we're just going to direct staff to bring this back for a topic for discussion with these items analyzed and feedback, and also through the lens of both our fiduciary and legal side to make sure what we can and cannot do as a pension plan versus employers and such. So it's a big ask. It's something that's been festering for 10 years, but I think if you can take that back, formulate it, and let's have an actual discussion in the boardroom about it.
Okay,
I have a question. Would that include our lobbyists? Because they would know directly how that's going to play out with respect to our legislators.
Will the staff determine who's best to run these through, and then who's best to have in the room when we're having these discussions?
I think my ask is to have that analysis in comparison to, like you said, we already knew this is coming. But what would it look like with these, you know, anybody could have an idea on some legislative changes.
Well, that
with that information, then maybe move forward.
Well, I think we can do both simultaneously, because, you know, really time is of the essence. Look at how Mr. Kryman is having a hard time getting people, because we can't help them out with respect to their benefits once they retire. So yes, I think that analysis would be good, but once we do it, let's put it into motion. In other words, how will that affect, or no, what can we do legislatively to amend PEPRA to meet our needs?
Yeah.
And also, speaking of the County Board of Supervisors, they're going to have the same problem. So with that in mind, perhaps we can appeal to them also. No, not that, you know, they should change, but if they have a legislative arm, you know, perhaps they can also move to amend PEPRA.
We can certainly explore what our alternatives are. I think that in terms of our plan sponsor, you know, they're looking at the bottom line, and it'll be something that we'll definitely have to have a discussion with them about it as part of this analysis, just to see, you know, what their feeling is. They may not view the problem in the same way. And so I just want to make sure that that you're aware that I will reach out to our plan sponsor, let them know that this is something that we're contemplating, and that we're going to be bringing it forward to the board of retirement for further direction.
Sean, isn't that discrimination where a captain and above, you know, when you start looking at the captain above, you're talking about, what, 15% of the department?
1%.
Huh?
1%.
1%? So 1% can do a 401k or other types, and the other 99 can't. Where every other businessman can have defined benefits, pension plans, and all the other things. Teachers have a TSA, tax sheltered annuity. They put 50% of their salary, if their wife's working, into a TSA, you know, when they're 40 years old. So I think we got to look at this. I mean, this is, to me, a very unfair thing that they're letting 1%, and I don't know what it is for the general, okay, do things that the regular person can't do.
It's a management prerogative.
Yeah.
It's a what?
Management compensation. So
Oh, it's not compensation. Hey, if you were getting it from the county, I could understand that. But this is your own money and you're making a decision on what I need to live and what I want to do for my retirement. And you're telling me now that the PEPRA at 13, you know, is limiting, and they should be able to put more money away, you know, to compensate for what they're going to lose.
Mr. Oakham, the non-managerial employees do have a 457 that they can contribute that also.
Yes.
But the cap is including the match from the employer, whereas a 401k does not include the cap of the employer. It also almost more than doubles it.
Right. Yeah,
So there's legitimate concerns about this in the future that the county needs to be aware of. This is not a LACERA. You know, LACERA can't directly influence.
Oh, I
that.
understand it, but it's a great selling point. If you know, I don't know, you having problems getting applicants for the fire department?
Applicants for the
Are
fire
you getting,
department.
They're stealing all the sheriff's employees.
Yeah.
I mean, it used to be, there was a long list waiting to get into the, and the same thing with law enforcement. Now, they're different problems. But, okay, we got to figure ways to attract people, not push them down.
So it's a heavy lift we just asked staff to do, and there's a lot of things that we can do. There's a lot of things that we can't do. So we have to make sure that we're, as a board, getting proper advice on what those things are. So we'll let staff take that and figure out how to best to address it. I don't think there's any objection from the board to let the plan sponsor know that we're looking at this, because we want the plan sponsor to know that it's a bigger problem than they realize. I know they're looking at the bottom line, but the bottom line is going to crash when they can't get employees to actually do the math of the bottom line and fill those items. So, okay. Where are we on the presentation? I know we're talking like we're at the conclusion.
Yeah, you know, I think we've covered pretty much everything I would say in the last couple slides. So, if I know we've run late, so I think.
Is there anything, I don't want to take away from your presentation, this is very important. So is there anything, any slides that you think that are important to address with us?
I mean, I guess just this one, maybe this one just right here, just briefly to say, I mean, so we're still looking at two scenarios here. The top box is showing the stable population growth with a 3.25% payroll, and the bottom set of results, the bottom box is showing the results of the with the 1% declining population. And there's sometimes a thought that if there's a declining population, it's going to hurt the funded ratio of the fund over time. But in this column second from the right here, you can see under both scenarios, the funded ratio is essentially the same under both scenarios. And the reason for that is because there's an amortization policy there to amortize unfunded liability over 20 years. And so it's kind of designed to do that by adjusting the employer contribution rate to make sure the unfunded liability was amortized. So you can see in the liability columns and the asset columns, I mean, under the declining population, the numbers, the projected liability and assets are lower than they are under the top set of numbers. And that's just because with a declining population, there's less benefits being earned. And so less benefits means less liabilities and means less contributions coming in, so it means less assets. But ultimately, the actual funded ratio is projected to be very similar. And I would leave it at that.
Perfect. Any last questions or comments from the presentation? Seeing none, thank you very much. Very, very excellent presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Okay, we're going to get to a break here in a second, but just want to ask any members wish to pull any of the additional reports. That's reports C through H for discussion. Seeing none, we're going to move on to items for staff review. I know we have a couple.
Trustee Kehoe requested that staff advance the request for members to have the option to pre-designate their retirement option. Legislative Affairs Officer Barry Liu will be agendizing that item for discussion at a future meeting. In regards to the PEPRA impact presentation, Trustee Green requested information of people with reciprocity coming and leaving over the last 10 years. He also requested that staff provide an analysis of the cap tier based off salary, as well as the potential earnings for legacy employees for 3 years. LACERA staff will partner with SACRS for a PEPRA amendment. These items will be agendized and brought back for future discussion. And lastly, Trustee Kehoe requested that staff educate our members and partners regarding the impact of PEPRA and its impact on LACERA membership.
Perfect. Thank you. Did we miss anything? I don't think we did. So moving on to items for future agendas. Any requests that we haven't addressed as of yet? Seeing none, we're going to do good of the order. Bonnie, if you can go around.
Trustee Green?
I have nothing, thank you.
Trustee Ginsburg?
Nothing, thank you.
Trustee Robbins?
Nothing.
Trustee Harris?
Nothing.
Trustee Bernstein?
I have a request for reports today were excellent. We legally are back here in person. We have to be here in person. I think barring truly extraordinary circumstances, it's better if all of our presentations take place in the boardroom.
Yes. We will make sure that happens. I mentioned that last month as well, and I was remiss to make sure that our consultants are here.
Our state legislative Zoom update, I think it's better in person.
Trustee Santos?
I agree with Mr. Bernstein. All presentations, all presenters should be present here with us.
Yes.
Trustee Gray?
Thank you. I won't make this long. But I would like to say that I've attended a couple of conferences in the past month. And I believe that, and all I can do is emphasize that it is important for my colleagues to seek as much education as you can as a trustee, and the other duties that we have that are collateral to just our fiduciary duty. I believe that that will make for a very good trustee, and it'll also make for good decision-making with respect to the issues that are raised, like the ones today. That's all I have.
Trustee Oakham?
Thank you.
Santos Kramen?
I just wanted to thank the board for all of your support. Also wanted to mention that we are dutifully going through orientation with the new trustees. I know that Trustee-elect Durazo should be here going through her orientation, portion of her orientation. We have spoken to the other trustees about attending educational conferences. And so we're in the process of making arrangements for them to participate in those as soon as possible. And so we're looking forward to welcoming them on board. But we have met them, and we are looking forward to working with them, quite frankly. And I just want to say thank you all and thank my staff for everything that they've done thus far.
Chair Kehoe?
Thank you. I got two things. One, we have a trustee that's habitually not here. So I'd like the staff to do something about that. Reach out, please, put something in writing. If I need to get involved, please do so. But we've had behind the scenes conversations, but I'm now bringing it to the boardroom because it does impact the ability for this board to function. We're a $76 billion fund, and to have a trustee that's habitually absent is a problem. I'll say that. The other thing is this month I've been busy, attended both the ALADS and the POPA presentations asking about retirement stuff, and LACERA staff has been there and done an absolutely outstanding, excellent job. And then I'm there just for moral support for the folks. But the one thing that I heard overwhelmingly was the problems with getting in-person meetings. And I was surveying, every single person wants in-person. They don't want online. They don't want over the phone. They want in-person, face-to-face. This is an important decision for them. And the availability is not there. They all raised it, both at POPA and ALADS. So we have to do better. We have to fix that situation. If we can do an online meeting, we can do an in-person meeting. So please take this, try and do what we can to open up those opportunities. Telling people that they got 4 months or that there's absolutely no windows available is just frankly not acceptable.
Mhm.
So, and that's just from that side of the shop. We got a huge county family that also wants to go and sit down in person. So if we can try and focus on that, I would appreciate it.
I know that was an issue that was raised several months ago, and so what we did do was we increased the number of available slots from 100% to I think it's 125%, and so we have individuals that schedule meetings that don't show up, and so we're trying our best to try to manage that. We do have a staffing challenge. We are delayed, like I said earlier, in terms of training our RBS 2s and 3s. But we'll take a look at it again to see what we can do to try to increase the number of slots available. But that is an ongoing concern for us as well. And we'd like to try to accommodate our members as much as we possibly can.
And no shows shouldn't be an issue because we should be doing it like the Disneyland Fast Track. So if person doesn't show up, the next person that did gets in. And if it turns out that there's nobody waiting, then we need to we know we got to increase the numbers. So I know we can get there. That frankly, I'm just going to call it like it is. I think that it's easier to do online appointments, and that's why we're moving towards online appointments. But that's not what the membership wants. The membership wants an in-person meeting with people, especially when they're sitting down to figure out the retirement benefits. So we really got to resolve that issue. I'll leave it at that. But I do want to relate that over 200 members I spoke to over the last month, and all of them wanted in person and raised concerns about it. So I'll leave it at that. I know that Mr. Rice, you have some comments.
Yes, thank you. For the record, agenda item 16B, an executive session, relates to the workplace claim of Corneliu Gavruliuk. And then second, with respect to executive session, we have a non-agenda item that I want to bring to the board's attention publicly and then request a potential action. We have an item relating to a threat to public safety and security that came to the attention of staff since the agenda was posted. This is an item that requires the board's immediate attention. So therefore, under Government Code, Section 54954.2B2, we're requesting that the board entertain a motion and a second and then a 2/3 vote to allow a closed session discussion on that item.
I'll make the motion. Second. Okay, let's go ahead and please vote.
Ms. Gray and Mr. Robbins, how would you like to cast your vote? Yeah, very good, thank you. Motion passes unanimously.
Motion passes unanimously. Okay, let's go ahead and do a 15-minute break. So we're going to get together at 11:30. We'll get back at 11:30.
Recording stopped.
Oh, Mr. Gray.